I look back on those moments and I don't take it for granted. Being able to be in the room and share the same space with, with those hip hop icons. And to respect me as a woman in hip hop, right? And to treat me always with the utmost respect. It meant everything to me.
Welcome to 11Alive Uninterrupted, a program that brings you in-depth conversations with influential thought leaders and dynamic visionaries in Atlanta. I'm your host, Naima Abdullahi. This week, we sit down one-on-one with Shanti Das, a music executive veteran who has held top positions in big record labels. We're talking about Capitol Records, Sony, LaFace, and Universal Motown. And she then shifted gears to her nonprofit work, Silence the Shame, a movement to address mental health needs in the Black community. Shanti Das, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm truly grateful.
It is an honor. Before we talk about Silence the Shame, let's talk about your music portfolio. You have worked with some of the top artists the world has ever seen, from Outkast to Prince. We're talking about Erykah Badu. I mean, decades in the music industry. What was that like for you as a little girl growing up in Atlanta?
Oh my gosh, I wanted to be something in music. I shadowed Ray Boyd, who was the program director at V103 when I was just in high school. And so I took that energy and I went to Syracuse University, majored in television, radio, and film, and I started interning at Capitol Records here in Atlanta, Georgia with Dee Dee Hibbler. And it was an awesome opportunity for me. And then upon graduation, I got hired at LaFace Records as promotions director. First record I ever worked was Players Ball from Outkast.
Wow.
Not too shabby for a first job.
The first single.
Yeah, and then I hit the road with Toni Braxton. She was opening up for Frankie Beverly and May, so I helped put together all of her radio meet and greets. So it was pretty awesome for me because I just, I was a young girl that loved music. I loved hip hop.
Yeah.
And I love pop music too growing up, so it was really, really incredible for me.
To say those names now in 2023, it's like, those are iconic names. At that moment, they're just hustling, building up their names. Did you kind of sense there was something special that was bubbling at the time, even when we consider Players Ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Freaknik for us that I knew when we really broke Outkast and, distributing their music and the materials. And TLC, I was on the Crazy Sexy Cool tour in 1995 and seeing how the fans reacted to them. I knew that they were incredibly talented, and I knew L.A. Reid and Babyface were special, and what we had put together at LaFace Records was pretty iconic. We kind of looked at LaFace as like the Motown of the South. Right, and then we ended up, having these mega artists, and so it was just an awesome time to be a part of that label and a part of the movement.
Was there something y'all saw in the artist before the world saw it that you just knew this is going to be an iconic person?
It's funny you say that. Working at LaFace, L.A. Reid always told us, he taught us to see if the artist had that it factor. So I would sit in some of the A&R meetings, even though I did promotions, and we knew who had it or not. Even with Pink, Pink was first signed to the label, I forget what year it was, but she came when she did her demo. She was with a group, I forgot the name of the group, but we ended up seeing, okay, she really has the it factor, and so we signed her to a solo deal. And so, it was just always knowing who really had, the vocal abilities, who could dance, who could perform, and who had that it factor.
And to see the industry from then to now, I mean, as someone on the receiving end of the music, just as a fan, we think of 1995 as one of those moments where Andre 3000 said, "The South got something to say." What was the story behind that, as Atlanta was really fighting to feel heard and to feel respected musically in the South?
So again, I am a product of the 70s and 80s baby, and we always gave a lot of, support to the East Coast artists, to the West Coast artists, and when it came to hip hop, we felt like, we were trying to find our way. And it was that pivotal moment in 1995, and I was there with the guys that night. It was really exciting, and it's funny, they were booed that night when they won, but I don't think they were booed because of who they were. They were booed because a New York artist didn't win. And so, but it really, I think, put everyone in hip hop on notice, like, okay, these guys in Atlanta are serious, the love is there and there's no turning back. And so Goody Mob and Outkast that night felt the love, and it hasn't been the same since. The South still has something to say.
To this day.
So many hip hop artists are still birthed out of Atlanta, and now hip hop is a global phenomenon. And I think Atlanta has a huge part of it. Now, you talk about Atlanta influences everything. Well, our music still influences everything.
What was your first moment of and I want to ask, because I think there was a lot of moments, but what was your one moment where you're like, I made it, huh? I really did make it.
This is early on, but I did a gold party for Outkast. And again, this is my second year at the company.
Right.
But I had been interning since my sophomore year. So, you know, a good 3 or 4 years of putting in the work. But at that moment, I realized, like, okay, I'm really in the business making things happen. But we had Biggie, Diddy, Usher, Busta Rhymes, Outkast, Goody Mob. We had MTV, BET Rap City, all of these people covering the event. And I thought, oh my God, like we are on the big stage now.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a special time. So that was one of the moments. And then I think when I got to do the marketing for Prince, I was like, okay, this is like the holy grail of marketing. Because like I get to work for Prince. Like he was already Prince, you know? And so I thought, what could I clearly add to his brilliance? But it was an opportunity of a lifetime when I moved up to New York City. So that was pretty awesome for a girl from Southwest Atlanta.
Yeah, did it ever come with imposter syndrome? Like, why me? Like,
oh yeah, you know, I think a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome, feeling like I don't deserve to be here. I don't really have what it takes. You know, the insecurities kind of come into play, whether it's in corporate America or the music industry. I think women and men often deal with that. But, you know, my faith also helped me a lot, and having family and friends that I felt like always quote unquote kept it real with me or told me the truth and really got me to understand that, you know, I put in the work, so I absolutely deserve to have a seat at the table. So I had those moments, but I leaned on my village to let me know that I was right where I was supposed to be. And so that was very empowering for me and allowed me to push through and forge on to being great.
A lot of people, you know, when they think about longevity in the industry and climbing up that corporate ladder, they may not know just being a good person is the secret sauce.
It's funny you say that. I always try to tell people, because, you know, there are toxic moments in the music industry, like corporate America, like working in entertainment or fashion or anything. But I always tell people, I'm just a Southern girl from the A. I'm a Georgia peach, you know, at the heart. And I always wanted to treat people with kindness, because that's how my mother raised me.
Treat people with respect, regardless of CEO or a janitor or
100%. Greg Street recently posted something, and he was talking about, you know, treat the assistant at the company the same way you treat the CEO, to your point. It goes a long way.
For you, what was that moment after reaching all your accomplishments where you said, it's time to switch things up? Let me reach this space of discomfort and start transitioning out of the music industry.
That was a tough decision for me. It was probably around the end of 2009. I had lost my uncle who helped to raise me. My mom started developing dementia. And you know, my sister was in North Carolina and my mom was there with her, and I didn't want all the responsibilities to fall on her. I was diagnosed with cervical spinal stenosis, so I had some physical health challenges, and I was essentially depressed, although I was not properly diagnosed. I was going to work taking naps. That's not like me. I'm type A. I'm a worker bee, a workaholic at times. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, I came to the decision, I made a tough decision to come back home and kind of walk away from a really big, really lucrative career. It was what I needed to do for me, and I just had to kind of block out the noise. But what got hard for me was in 2014 when my best friend took her own life. And I talked to her the day before it happened, so I blamed myself. And then I came really close to taking my own life in 2015.
With that hardship, what was your light at the end of the tunnel? And I'm so sorry to hear about what your friend went through, but that guilt that you felt, so many other people feel as well, because the signs are never as apparent as we think it should have been.
No, they're not. And I tried to, you know, go over it over and over and over and retrace the conversation and the thoughts, and I just couldn't figure out what I had missed. And my dad also died by suicide when I was 7 months old. So her death kind of caused me to start unpacking a lot of my own trauma from my dad's death and suicide, and things I didn't deal with as a young girl growing up in Southwest Atlanta, because we didn't talk about mental health in the Black community. And so one thing led to another, and so I went down, you know, a very dark place. And my light at the end of the tunnel was my sister and my pastor, My sister convinced me to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-TALK, and now you can dial 988. And also my pastor, Dr. Raphael G. Warnock, who is now our senator from Ebenezer Baptist Church. He said, I'll pray with you, but you need to get help.
What was that prayer like when he prayed with you? What did he say?
I mean, whenever he prays, he usually quotes scriptures. I don't exactly remember the exact prayer, but it was basically saying, God, give Shanti, you know, the strength and ability to be able to go to the doctor to get the help that she needs, that it's actually okay to see someone, right? It's okay to have, you know, prayer and medicine, right? And so to this day, you know, he is a dear friend and my spiritual coach, and I'm very grateful. My sister passed away, unfortunately, who was one of the biggest inspirations in my life. But that dark moment gave me the courage to want to help other people, because I realized that for me to get to this low point, I thought about how many other people who have either been at this point or who have experienced it but aren't talking about it. And because we didn't talk about it in our society, it made me want to, you know, kind of really get out there and tell as many people as I could.
I'm so glad that you reached that courageous point of saying there is an external help outside of prayer. And some of the stigmas that we oftentimes see is, you know, prayer is the only solution.
The stigma was really, I think, strong and thick, and it wasn't something that we talked about, whether it was suicide. I had a cousin who had schizophrenia growing up, and one of my family members would say, oh, your cousin's having another one of those fits. F-I-T. I'm like, what is a fit? It was something that we had manufactured, right? A way to describe our feelings and things we were going through. And so it was even a stigma around just calling the name of what it was. Even though if someone had cancer or a heart attack, and you would say that, nobody wanted to say schizophrenia, right? You had to come up with this fake name for it. And so it's so many things, a plethora of different stigmas, I think, that exist, and some that still exist present day, but
because I never heard, like, now that I think about it, like, I never heard mental health, like, growing up. Those two words combined, like, I heard mental and I heard health, but I never heard mental health growing up.
Or you just would hear people say, oh, he's crazy, or she's Uncle Pete, he's crazy.
You
know, and that C word, you know, we all use it and throw it around sometimes, but I try to kind of erase it and try not to use it as much as I can, you know, to be very cognizant and aware, because I think language really matters when you're talking about mental and physical health, especially in mental health. Language matters. And so the work that I do at Silence the Shame is we try to educate and empower communities around emotional health and wellness to help erase those stigmas, to help provide adults, right, and youth in the community healthier ways to cope.
Tell me, when did you start Silence the Shame? When did you say, you know what, this is a logo, this is going to be trademarked, this is a company, this isn't just call me whenever you need help, like this is a foundational structure for the community. Tell me about that journey.
So the first time I ever came up with the term was probably a couple months after I had gone through my own challenges in 2015, and I was doing an interview at Atlanta's on V103, and I was on
where I interned, by the way,
with Ryan Cameron, who is now on another station, but he was on at the time, and I said, you know, we should just silence the shame. I don't know what people are embarrassed about. But then that marketing, you know, in me, went off, I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of like catchy. And I thought, okay. So I created a little hashtag. So in 2016, I enlisted the help of some of the folks in the music community, like Nick Cannon and others came on and did a couple PSAs for us. So we did a soft launch in 2016, but in 2017, a foundation was formed. And kind of the rest is history. We even have our own day. May 5th is National Silence the Shame Day.
Nationally.
It's National Silence the Shame Day.
That is huge. If you never took that leap of faith where you were just going off on a feeling that something else was out there, do you ever think back to that day you were in your office packing up things into different boxes? What would you tell that girl?
Trust yourself and trust God. Because we always doubt ourselves, especially in times of transition. When it's time to pivot, you still have to trust yourself and know that the talent, you don't lose the talent. Even if you transition and you resign or you lose a job, you got there for a reason to that point.
Right.
Your skills are transferable, so you got to trust yourself. And whether you believe in God or the universe, trust a higher power other than yourself, and it'll get you through.
What was that full circle moment like where you brought back something you innovated and created back into the music industry community as a resource for those who need help? Tell me about that full circle moment.
I will be honest, the full circle moment for me was just seeing the fruits of my labor and seeing how many people now use Silence Your Shame as a hashtag, how many musicians, have supported us.
And to see that 360 of everything coming back in full circle. One thing that comes to mind is how much mental health resources are needed in the hip hop community. We see so many young artists pass away so young, and I oftentimes wonder with how repetitive it is in the headlines, like what resources could externally be provided internally to not only the labels, but just the community as a whole.
That's a great question. I think a lot of our musicians, and particularly ones in hip hop, there's a lot of trauma around, even some of the violence that we see in the community, some of the hip hop artists that are, dying by, gunshot wounds and that sort of thing. The grieving process is really difficult for the artists. So there is a huge need for, I think, therapists, psychologists to support, grief counselors and that sort of thing. I do like the fact that a lot of labels, have internal resources, and there's a lot of external resources available. It's like, for example, the Recording Academy and Music Cares, which is the foundation arm, they do a lot of support around substance abuse issues, behavioral health issues, and mental health challenges. Silence Your Shame, obviously, we created what's called the Soundtrack of Mental Health, which are trainings that we administer to record companies as well as musicians and artists to support. So it's a lot of really good resources that are starting now, and especially I think since the pandemic, most companies now realize the need for mental health support, and so it's a lot more support out there.
When the people who are supposed to work for you
work against you, we're here.
Looking deep into the issues affecting you.
Our exclusive investigation found hundreds of elevators across Metro Atlanta could be dangerous.
Questioning authority.
Making sure promises offered.
This is a bill that could stand to help every Georgian.
Are promises kept?
11Alive investigates immediate solutions.
Demanding answers to help make life better.
Because for every problem,
there is a solution. 11Alive News.
You started it was all in your head, and then it came out, and it's now, an amazing nonprofit organization. Are you ever surprised at how it makes such a national difference with the phone calls you get, this helped my teenager, this helped me, because I'm sure your call log stays busy. Are there ever moments it's like, if I didn't start this, would all of this difference ever happen?
Yeah, well, I don't take the credit for it, but I am humbled by the amount of people that I've seen supported locally and nationally and even globally. We get a lot of direct messages at times saying, my son saw some of your, videos, and it really encouraged him and helped him want to go to therapy, or my husband got help because of you and hearing your story and your journey. Because right now I'm still a little bit of the face of the organization, although I'm excited that we're starting to shift away from that, and there's a real face of the organization now, knowing what we do. We've kind of streamlined a lot of our focus, and so our areas right now are Black youth and Black adults. And we've seen the suicide rates increase for Black youth up 36% from 2018 to 2021. So we're doing a lot of youth programming now. So it's just wonderful. We have a lot of people in other cities that are like, please bring your community conversation or your teen clinic to our area. So we're really working on funding right now so that we can expand our programming on a national level. We're forming a lot of strategic partnerships also, just with other foundations, because I think there's strength in numbers. So we've also partnered with Usher's New Look Foundation, with Carisha and her team and Jess and all the amazing people over there. We work with the Boys and Girls Club, the United Way. DVHDD, so many other wonderful organizations in Georgia.
A community of support.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And I'm so glad we got a chance to feature Silence the Shame. There's something about your aura where people know you have a good heart. You're in it for the right reasons. And now you're transitioning that impact into that nonprofit space, which is why it is getting national attention, because you being the centerpiece and now you building a team around that, I think this is only the beginning for you in that space as well.
Thank you. From your mouth to God's ears.
Listen, we go continue manifesting.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, the viewer, for tuning in for this edition of 11 Alive Uninterrupted. We'll see you next time.